Now we're going to talk about Caledonia myths and policy issues. Now that we've discussed Caledonia's victims, let's address some of the key myths and policy issues that need to be exposed and addressed. Vexatious land claims. The Six Nations people are not, as many would have you believe, indigenous to Canada. They lived in the area south of the Great Lakes in what is now the United States. When they were...
Hold it, just, if you can't be polite, you'll have to leave.
Shut up! Hey!
Right away. Even brain damage. Get right.
I wonder why they're so desperate to silence the voices of the victims. For 5 years, this is what we've had to deal with. You're seeing it up close now. If I were an Aboriginal speaker talking about being victimized and talking on behalf of other people, I just can't believe that anybody in this audience would actually interrupt while we're talking. I just can't believe that. So let's go on. Let's try and go on. So, the Six Nations people are not indigenous to Canada. They lived in the area south of the Great Lakes, in what is now the United States. When they were dispossessed of their lands after the American Revolutionary War, the Crown rewarded them for their service as loyal allies by purchasing the Haldimand Tract from the Mississauga Indians as a refuge for them, as per the Haldimand Proclamation of 1784. The Six Nations people were treated honorably by a grateful Crown. Canada did not steal land from them, it bought it for them, so they could settle here in safety. Six Nations later surrendered large portions of the tract for sale. The federal government has stated that these surrenders were valid, and it does not recognize the Douglas Creek Estates in Caledonia as a valid land claim. According to 3 different Superior Court judges who have ruled against 3 other illegal occupations in Cayuga, Hagersville, and Brantford, the recognized representatives of Six Nations have not made any claim for possession or return of the Haldimand Tract, and such a claim would not succeed even if they did. The only claim Six Nations have made is for monetary compensation that may be owing. In 2010, a Superior Court judge granted Brantford an injunction against violent occupations that were destroying the city's economy. After reviewing a report on the Haldimand Tract land transfers by an expert from the Ipperwash inquiry named Joan Holmes and the related documents, the judge ruled as follows, quote, "For more than 150 years, the Six Nations did nothing to indicate to innocent third-party purchasers that there was any problem with title to their lands. Property has been bought and sold over that time, period. The Six Nations did commence a claim in 1995 against the federal and provincial governments seeking compensation, but never for return of the land. Still, there was no notice to private landowners when that action was commenced or after of any problem with their title. It was not until this case commenced that the Six Nations claimed to have the right to control the activities of private landowners on the basis that the private land within the city of Brantford belonged to the Six Nations. I conclude such an argument must fail." 3 separate Superior Court judges. Despite the vacuous nature of their claims, Native lawbreakers were able to create a cascade of benefits for themselves. In a letter dated April 17, 2006, the provincial and federal governments attempted to bribe the occupiers to end their occupation with offers that included the transfer of 380 acres of land from a former correctional facility, which was done, the possibility of even more land transfers, research funding for land and resource issues, and funds for, quote, public education regarding land claims. In September 2008, the Turtle Island News reported details of an audit showing that in 1 year, Six Nations received $1,131,382 for negotiations, some of which was paid to members of the Haudenosaunee Development Institute, HDI, and the Haudenosaunee Men's Fire, HMF, who were involved in illegal occupations and intimidating non-native landowners. In other words, the Ontario government's paying money to the people responsible for the lawlessness in Caledonia. Between 2006 and 2007, Brian Jesse Porter, who would eventually be charged for pulling a stolen hydro tower across Caledonia's main road on December 1st, 2007, received $131,240, as stated by Ontario's Ministry of Finance in its Public Accounts of Ontario report. Caledonia is a national security issue, but has never been admitted publicly. What has never been admitted publicly.
Excuse me. Look, I'm just warning you one more time. If you don't want to be quiet, we'll have you escorted. It's your choice. I'm asking you to be polite. We're all here to see this presentation. If you don't want to see it, you can leave. If you interrupt one more time, we'll have you escorted out.
Okay, we'll say
Just be polite.
You might learn something.
doubtful they're morons.
What has never been admitted publicly by the OPP or Ontario government is that Native criminals are being aided by a coalition of anarchists, radical unionists, and anti-Israel groups led by an anarchist named Tom Keefer from Local 3903 of the Canadian Union of Public Employees at York University. Tom Keefer and CUPE 3903, with help from other locals from CUPE, CAW, OPSU, CEP, and USW, United Steelworkers, began supporting Aboriginal militants in Caledonia after the failed OPP raid of April 20th, 2006, when police were driven off the occupation site after being attacked with weapons. By this time, according to OPP testimony at the Brown-Chatwell trial, the Caledonia site, occupation site, was taken over by the Mohawk Warriors, which police considered to be, quote, akin to Hell's Angels, a group which was involved in organized crime, cigarette running, with a reputation for physical confrontation and access to guns, including assault rifles. The Warriors murdered Quebec Police Corporal Marcel Lemay in Oka, and they were in Ipperwash during the violent takeover of the Canadian Forces base there, which led to the death of Dudley George and further intimidation of the residents. In addition to supporting the Warriors, Keefer states in a November 15, 2009 report, his coalition is, quote, working closely with the Haudenosaunee Men's Fire, HMF. On April 3, 2009, the Superior Court judge ruling against the HMF illegal occupation in Hagersville said that they had engaged in, quote, extortion, intimidation, nuisance, trespass, and inducing breach of contract. Members of CUPE 3903 were, according to the report, quote, present on the barricades when Six Nations militants blockaded the major Highway 6 bypass around Caledonia for 4 days in April 2008, and they actually contributed financially to this illegal action. Keefer and CUPE worked with the anarchist Black Cross Federation and the Fredonia Anarchist Foundation. In his report, Keefer states Fredonia donated $3,000 to CUPE, $1,000 of which was funneled to Jim Windle, a reporter with Tekowanaka News on Six Nations, who published articles trying to smear us as white supremacists. After we filed a lawsuit, the Teka's publisher printed a clarification saying it had no evidence. This is a Six Nations paper that smeared us as white supremacists, said they had no evidence we were associated with white supremacist groups. Fredonia also gave money to an anti-capitalist newsletter in Toronto called Basics. Editor Steve De Silva was an invited speaker at a Keefer/CUPE June 23, 2009 anti-Caledonia protest in Cayuga. Basics' MySpace page provides a list of his heroes, include Mao Zedong, Marx, Lenin, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Malcolm X, and the Black Panther Party. Friends of Basics include Free Palestine, which uses a logo showing Che Guevara under the slogan Palestina Libre. This is a picture of the Palestinian flag flying on the occupied Douglas Creek estates, along with both the Six Nations and the Mohawk Warriors flag. It was placed there by the Niagara Palestinian Association on May 3, 2006. This is the Vice President of the Canadian Arab Federation, Ali Mallah, in a 2006 protest, walking beside someone carrying a Mohawk Warrior flag and another carrying the portrait of Hassan Nasrallah, leader of the terror group Hezbollah. On November 27, 2006, the Canadian Arab Federation petitioned the Canadian government to have both Hezbollah and Hamas removed from the list of terror organizations. This is another picture of Canadian Arab Federation Vice President Ali Mallah speaking beside the Mohawk Warrior flag. This picture shows the warrior flag with an anti-Israel poster depicting the Israel Defense Forces as heartless murderers intentionally dropping a bomb on a child and a Jew as a hooded executioner. Another group active in supporting the lawlessness in Caledonia is the Christian peacemaker teams. The UN has condemned the Hamas charter for laying out, quote, a blueprint for jihadist terrorism, unquote, directed at killing Jews and destroying the state of Israel. But the CPT's FAQ page for their Palestine mission portrays Hamas as a humanitarian organization. At the June 2009 anti-Caledonia protest, one of Keefer's invited speakers expressed his solidarity with those wearing logos of the Tamil Tigers terror group. In a paper entitled Declaring the Exception, Direct Action, Six Nations, and the Struggle in Brantford, Tom Keefer laid out a plan showing how economic warfare against Brantford could force the government to grant Native militants an area not subject to Canadian law. That's what he said. A second way for Six Nations to win is if they can escalate their blockades in a manner that continues to financially hurt the city of Brantford, while also making clear that attempts at police or military intervention would be costly and impractical means of resolving the situation. By escalating direct action tactics and mobilizing a larger number of people from Six Nations, this approach might force the city of Brantford to recognize Six Nations land rights and sovereignty through some kind of wide-ranging and innovative agreement with the Confederacy and the HDI. Those are the groups responsible for all the lawlessness in Caledonia. According to MPP Toby Barrett, communities within the Haldimand Tract have suffered an estimated $4.1 billion, with a B, dollars in economic losses due to this lawlessness. Six Nations Councillor Helen Miller, in a letter written to the Brantford Expositor, July 14, 2009, said, the people of Six Nations are, quote, fed up with the protests and fed up with these groups of people and individuals claiming to speak for them. She goes on to say, as for who represents Six Nations, let me put it this way. The Mohawk workers, women of the Mohawk Nation, the Men's Fire, or individuals like Stephen Boots Powis, who terrorized Brantford, or Ruby and Floyd Montour, who terrorized everybody, were not elected, appointed, or authorized by the people of Six Nations to be their representatives or to speak on their behalf. Nor is the Haudenosaunee Development Institute, the HDI, supported by the elected council or the community at large. Nevertheless, Keefer and CUPE continue to bring non-native radicals into Caledonia to support these groups. Despite being forewarned that they were bussing in people to disrupt our February 27th Truth and Reconciliation rally, that was the monument we were trying to put up, the OPP refused to provide officers to separate them from us, refused to prevent them from trespassing on the private property we were forced to relocate to, and watched as we were screamed at, assaulted, and set up for bogus assault charges. I'm so glad these guys are here today, so you can get a little taste of it. One of the two shocked observers from the International Free Press Society present that day said, quote, I didn't feel as though I was in Canada. Make no mistake about it, Caledonia is the front line for extreme left-wing radicals who are using native crime groups as proxies for their own anti-capitalist, anarchist mission to undermine the rule of law in Canada.